Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering news from the Church. Today is Wednesday, June 16, 2021. The Pope has issued a decree that the presidents of spiritual movements can only be in office for a maximum of 10 years. The Holy Father has rejected the resignation letter presented by Cardinal Marx, Archbishop of Munich, and asked him to continue in his position and assume his responsibility. Cardinal Gasper has expressed his concern regarding the development of the German Synod and expressed his regret that the letter written by the Pope to the participants has been ignored. The Pope has accepted the resignation of Cardinal Stella as prefect of the Congregation for the Clergy, and on his place has appointed Monsignor Ju from South Korea. The Vatican have rejected the accusations of protecting pedophiles made against the president of the Polish Bishop Conference and has closed the investigation. The Pope has forbidden presidents of spiritual movements to be in office for more than 10 years.
The Dicastery for the Laity has issued a general decree with the force of law that regulates the duration and number of government mandates with a maximum of 10 consecutive years in international associations of the faithful. Founders may be exempted.
An explanatory note published by the Dicastery together with the decree points out that Pope Francis wants to promote synodality in the movements and avoid self-referentiality, which could occur, according to the Pope, when a leader perpetuates himself for many years at the head of the institution.
At the same time, the Dicastery, aware of the key role played by the founders, reserves the right to dispense them from the limits established for the mandates, but only if it considers it opportune for the development and stability of the association or entity, and if such dispensation corresponds to the clear will of the central governing body.
Among other entities that will be affected by the measure are the Neo-Catechumenal Way, the Parish Cells, the Cursillos of Christianity, the Charismatic Renewal, Communion and Liberation, San Egidio, and the Franciscans of Mary.
The Pope has not accepted Cardinal Marx's resignation as Archbishop of Munich, which he offered him as an example of behavior in the face of child abuse.
Pope Francis has written a letter to the Archbishop of Munich, Cardinal Marx, in which he thanks him for his courage in resigning because of his conduct in cases of sexual abuse by priests in his care, while telling him that he does not accept his resignation and asking him to continue to lead his local church.
The Pope says in the letter to the German cardinal that in the face of the crisis suffered by the whole Church due to the issue of sexual abuse by priests and the actions of many bishops in these cases, the ostrich policy leads to nothing and assures,
"It is urgent to air this reality of abuses and how the Church proceeded, and to let the Spirit lead us to the desert of desolation, to the cross, and to the resurrection," says the Pontiff.
"This is my answer, dear brother," the Pope concludes. "Continue as Archbishop of Munich, and if you are tempted to think that by confirming your mission and not accepting your resignation, this Bishop of Rome, your brother who loves you, does not understand you, think of what Peter felt before the Lord when, in his own way, he presented his resignation to him. 'Depart from me, for I am a sinner,' and listen to the answer, 'Shepherd my sheep.'"
Cardinal Gasper has expressed his concern about the development of the German Synod and warned that they cannot approve things contrary to what the Church teaches.
Cardinal Casper has criticized the German Synodal Assembly. He assures that it is beyond my imagination that demands such as the abolition of celibacy and the ordination of women to the priesthood would achieve majority support, and asks why the letter sent to them by the Pope was not heeded more.
In an interview, Casper said that the synodal path does not really present a good image to the public. I am very concerned, but I am cautious about making a definitive overall judgment. We do not have a resolution text yet.
It is neither a synod nor a mere process of dialogue, Casper says. At first, it should be a process of dialogue. Then the Bishops' Conference must have the floor. And finally, as far as the demands of the Universal Church are concerned, it is up to the Pope. Moreover, each bishop is free to adopt in his diocese what he sees fit.
We Germans enjoy respect in the world for our clear thinking, for our organizational talent, for our willingness to give, also for theology. But I also notice that other nations react with irritation when we give the impression that we want to lead the way.
The Congregation for the Clergy has a new prefect, Monsignor Yu from South Korea, who replaced Cardinal Stella.
The Bishop of Daejeon, South Korea, has been named the new prefect of the Congregation for the Clergy. Monsignor Lazaro Yu will succeed Cardinal Beniamino Stella, who is almost 80 years old, who will remain in office until the new prefect takes office.
Bishop Yu is 69 years old and is Bishop of Daejeon in South Korea. The new prefect knows the Pope and received him in his diocese during Francis's trip to Korea in August 2014. He belongs to the folklore movement.
The Congregation for the Clergy is currently receiving an apostolic visitation to review its functioning. Monsignor Miragoli, Bishop of Mondovi in Italy, has been entrusted by the Pope to carry it out.
The Vatican has closed the investigation open against the President of the Polish Episcopate and has declared the accusation against him unfounded.
After the corresponding investigation, the Holy See has considered the accusations against Archbishop Gadecki for negligence regarding 2 cases of sexual abuse against minors carried out by priests of his diocese to be unfounded and has closed the proceedings.
After former complaints following the established canonical procedures, the Holy See has conducted an investigation into the accusations of alleged negligence of the Archbishop of Poznan and President of the Polish Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Gadecki, in connection with the sexual abuse of minors by 2 priests.
Following an exhaustive analysis of the documentation collected, the Holy See has considered the aforementioned accusations unfounded, and therefore the complaints filed in these cases are dismissed, and the proceedings are considered closed, says the statement issued by the Nunciature.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on the Pope's rejection of the resignation requested by Cardinal Marx as Archbishop of Munich.
One more week I have to talk again about Germany. It is quite boring to go on and on about the same thing, as if there were not many other things going on in the church. However, there is no choice but to return to the subject, because in reality what is happening in Germany, especially with the synodal path, with the German Synod, it is very important and will mark the next history of the church. A week ago, Cardinal Marx, Archbishop of Munich, surprisingly presented his resignation to the Pope. Well, actually a week ago it was made public, because he had tendered his resignation on May 21st. The Pope told him when he presented it to wait a few days to make it public, and on Friday of last week he told him that he could do it. A great surprise. But this surprise may have had an explanation. 2 weeks before Cardinal Marx presented his resignation at the beginning of May, news had been published that the cardinal could be denounced for complicity in pederasty. Not for pederasty, but for having in some way collaborated by not denouncing a pederast priest when he was Bishop of Treves in Germany. Not only was he involved, but also Bishop Batzing, the current president of the episcopate and the current Bishop of Treves. In other words, there was a suspicion that the cardinal could be prosecuted for cover-up. The news came out. 2 weeks later, he presented his resignation in secret to the Pope, who in turn took 2 weeks to tell him to publish it. Many thought it was an elegant way for Cardinal Marx to leave, before the accusation of a cover-up could come out. But in addition, in the letter in which Marx presented his withdrawal, his resignation, in that letter he said that he wanted to continue working as a bishop. A cardinal who wants to continue as a bishop, and although he does not say so, it is taken for granted that he is not going to go as bishop to Germany, where he comes from, but to another place. Well, many also thought that he was asking for a position in the Vatican as head of some Vatican congregation. Either he was resigning before the official request for his resignation was made, or he was asking for a position in the Vatican which, among other things, would give him some immunity because he would be a citizen of the Vatican, and if he did not want to, he could not be put on trial. In any case, these are obviously possibilities. But the possibilities have been discussed a lot since the news of his resignation became known last Friday. The Pope is supposed to have been investigating in the 2 weeks between the time he submits his resignation and the time the Pope tells him he can go public. He is supposed to have been investigating what truth there is to the possible indictment of Cardinal Marx if he were to come to trial before a German court. I imagine and also sure that they have been investigating, because I repeat, it is a news that was published 2 weeks before Marx presented his resignation. The fact is that after taking another week to give an answer, the Pope has told Cardinal Marx that he must remain in his place as Archbishop of Munich. He has done so with a letter that has been published with very high praise, extraordinarily high praise, very, very high praise indeed, where he even compares him to Jesus Christ in some way, where he shows him his love and affection. But he tells him that he has to remain in his place. He tells him that he has to stay in Munich, and therefore he's telling him that he has to assume his responsibilities. If there were any, that remains to be seen. What will happen if he covered up for any priest? That he has to assume his responsibilities, not only in that case, but also with respect to the German Synod. The Pope does not speak of the German Synod. Marx, thus, in his letter of resignation, he said that the German Synod is the way out of the situation of chaos, of the situation of deadlock in which the Church is. The Pope does not mention the German Synod at all, but he does tell him that he must remain in Munich and therefore assume his responsibilities. I've had the impression that this highly praiseworthy letter, but telling him to stay in his place and therefore not bringing him or taking him to Rome, this highly praiseworthy letter was a silk glove covering an iron fist. You stay there and you have to go ahead facing what may come to you. God willing indeed that nothing comes against the cardinal, because it would hurt him. I have no desire that anyone suffers, and because it would hurt the Church. You stay there, you face your responsibilities, and also the responsibilities that come with having launched the German Synod. But it is also that this week I'm convinced that it is not by chance. Cardinal Casper, German, a very, very close friend of the Pope, as much or more than Cardinal Marx, a man of trust of the Holy Father, liberal, progressive, like Cardinal Marx, has made some very critical statements against the German Synod. The same week in which the Pope tells Cardinal Marx that he has to stay in his place and assume his responsibilities, I repeat, in an extraordinarily complimentary way, the same week Casper says that the German Synod is going in the wrong direction and says that they have not heeded the Pope's letter to the German bishops, a letter in which the Pope insisted that they take more care in the matter of evangelization and that they should not think that the reform was going to come from structural changes. For example, the ordination of women or the acceptance of the practice of homosexuality. Casper, liberal, friend of the Pope, German, against the German Synod, openly, critically, and harshly. The same week the Pope tells Marx, "Stay in your place." It seems to me, at least, that there is a reading. I do not know if it is the only one, but it seems to me that there is a reading. Especially because, a few days ago, when it was already known that Marx had presented his resignation, but it was not yet public, the reform of the Code of Canon Law was made public, which, among other things, makes it clear that that person, supposedly a bishop, who tries to ordain a woman priestess or deacon, because it speaks of holy orders, that person is automatically excommunicated. Criticism of the German Synod by a person very close to the Pope, Cardinal Casper. Keeping Cardinal Marx in place to assume his responsibilities, including those of the German Synod, and others of a criminal nature which God forbid should come, and then the Code of Canon Law. I believe that the Pope is sending a very clear message to the German bishops, to the Catholic Church in Germany, but in a special, particular way to the German bishops, and he is telling them, I will not give in to your pretensions. Do what you want, but I will not give in. The Church will not give in. If this is so, if this interpretation of mine is correct, it seems to me to be an extraordinary piece of news, something that justifies that once again we have to talk about Germany. See you next week, God willing.
If you like to keep up to date with what is happening in the Church, you can visit us in our website, www.themagnificat.tv. See you next week, God willing.